15th, 1919, a winter day just like any other. Except this time, the threat didn't come from snow or ice. It came from syrup? Welcome back to Pretty Strange. I'm your host, Taylor, and today we're diving into one of the stickiest, strangest, and most tragic disasters in American history. We're talking about the Great Molasses Flood of 1919. 21 dead, over 100 injured, and all of it thanks to a 50-foot tank of industrial-grade molasses that decided to explode in the middle of Boston's North End. Sounds bizarre, right? But stick around. This story's got sabotage, structural failure, physics-defying dynamics, and a legal battle that helps shape modern corporate accountability. Let's get into it. Boston in the early 20th century was a city in motion. Immigrants, factories, shipyards, the whole industrial machine humming along. And molasses? It wasn't just for cookies. It was a key ingredient in making explosives, alcohol, and all sorts of wartime goods. During World War I, molasses was basically liquid gold, and the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, USIA for short, had one of the biggest molasses tanks around. This tank stood 50 feet tall, held 2.3 million gallons of the stuff, and loomed over the north end like some kind of sticky silo of doom. Now here's the thing. People noticed that this tank was sketchy. It leaked. It groaned when it was filled. Paint was peeling off. Not only was it an eyesore, it was obviously a potential liability. But profit margins don't care about aesthetics. The tank was built in 1915 and rushed to meet wartime demand. It was never fully tested. It was filled with its first load of 1.3 million gallons before it was even finished. And get this, the steel used to build it was 10% thinner than what was ordered. That alone made it vulnerable to cracking under pressure. January 15th was a weirdly warm day for Boston. The temperature rose above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, unusual for mid-January. Workers had just warmed a fresh batch of molasses to make it less viscous for transfer. And then, around 12:30 p.m., the tank ruptured. A 25-foot-high wave of molasses surged through the streets at about 35 miles per hour. Imagine that. A tsunami of syrup moving as fast as a car. It knocked buildings off their foundations, swept a train off the tracks, drowned horses, and crushed people. 21 died and over 150 were injured. Many suffocated in the thick, sticky sludge. Firefighters from Engine 31 tried to help, but even they got trapped. One survivor described it as a wall of death. Another said the streets looked like a battlefield covered in tar. The wave was 160 feet wide at its peak. It spread out across the north end, settling into a depth of 2 or 3 feet. Now, let's get a little sciencey, because this wasn't just a flood. This was a gravity current. Molasses is a non-Newtonian fluid. That means its viscosity changes depending on the force applied. So under stress, it flows more easily, but in cold temperatures, it thickens up fast. On that day, the molasses inside the tank was slightly warmer than the outside air, probably about 7 to 9 degrees warmer. When it hit the cold Boston air, it cooled rapidly, turning from a fast-moving wave into a suffocating trap. Researchers in 2016 calculated that the wave moved about 55 kilometers per hour, or 35 miles an hour, and that's because molasses is about 1.5 times denser than water, and the tank was filled near capacity. All that potential energy turned into kinetic energy when the tank burst. So yes, this was a real-life sticky tsunami, but it behaved nothing like a wave of water. One firefighter recalled, "We tried to wade through it, but it was like walking through glue. Men were sinking, horses were drowning, it was hell." A local shopkeeper said, "I looked out my window and saw this brown wall coming. I thought it was smoke. Then I realized it was molasses." And a survivor rescued hours later said, I couldn't breathe. It was everywhere. In my mouth, my nose. I thought I'd die in syrup. These aren't just stories, though. These are testaments to a disaster that was as horrifying as it was strange. In the aftermath, 3 main theories debating what actually happened emerged. One was fermentation. The molasses fermented, built up pressure, and blew the tank from within. Or 2, structural failure. The tank was just poorly built. Thin steel plates, not enough rivets, bad design. Or there was also number 3, sabotage. Anarchists or Bolsheviks planted a bomb to disrupt wartime production. Yep, sabotage. Because apparently a molasses flood isn't wild enough without a dash of Red Scare paranoia. USIA even claimed an external explosion caused the rupture, but investigators found no evidence of a bomb. Instead, they found rivets that had shot out like bullets when the tank exploded. MIT's Charles Spofford concluded it was indeed structural failure. The tank was improperly designed, the steel was too thin, and the rivets way too few. Still, the sabotage theory lingered, maybe because it's easier to blame a shadowy figure than admit carelessness and greed killed 21 people. The cleanup took weeks. Firefighters used salt water to break down the molasses. Sand and horse manure were tossed on the streets to make them walkable again. And legally, it was also a mess. Over 100 lawsuits were filed. The trials lasted about 6 years. Over 3,000 witness testimonies were taken. In 1925, Judge Oden ruled that USIA was responsible for the flawed construction. The court found that the tank had burst because the factor of safety was too low. Insufficient maintenance had been carried out on a storage unit that was poorly put together in the first place. USIA continued to try to blame sabotage, but the evidence pointed to negligence, and in the end, they paid. Eventually, USIA paid out $628,000 in damages, which would be about $11.4 million today. But here's the kicker. This disaster actually helped spark real change. New regulations required engineers to sign and seal plans, building inspectors to examine projects, and architects to actually show their work. So in a way, Boston's sticky tragedy helped build the modern system of industrial safety. So what do we take away from all this? That sometimes the strangest disasters are the ones that can teach us the most. That molasses isn't just for gingerbread. It's a reminder of how negligence can turn something sweet into something deadly. Thanks for listening to Pretty Strange. If you liked this short and sweet episode, leave a review, share it with a friend, and follow me on social media for behind-the-scenes content and teasers of upcoming episodes. Until next time, stay curious and question everything.